The massive chamber on Nexus Prime hummed with tension as delegates from across the galaxy gathered for what everyone knew would be the final day of negotiations. Jake Morrison sat at the human delegation table, his fingers drumming silently against the polished surface while he watched the alien representatives take their positions around the circular chamber. The Zephyrians glowed like living crystals in their section, their tall forms refracting the chamber's light into dancing rainbows across the walls. Speaker Zethkar stood among them, his crystalline body pulsing with what Jake had learned to recognize as satisfaction. The aquatic Delphi floated in their specialized tanks, their tentacles moving in complex patterns that Jake's translator software couldn't quite decode. The insectoid hive queens clicked and chittered in their corner, their collective consciousness making decisions faster than any individual mind could follow. Admiral Lisa Stone leaned over to whisper something to Trade Commissioner Paul Davis, but Jake already knew what they were discussing. 3 months of negotiations had led to this moment, and the Council's demands had only grown more unreasonable with each passing day. The human delegation will now hear the final terms, Speaker Zethkar announced, his voice carrying the authority of 10,000 years of galactic civilization. These conditions are not subject to further discussion or modification. Jake stood slowly, smoothing down his simple black suit. Around him, the alien delegates watched with expressions ranging from smugness to curiosity. They had been so certain that humanity would accept whatever terms were offered. After all, what choice did a young species have when faced with the combined will of the galaxy's oldest civilizations? Humanity will immediately cease all colonization activities beyond the systems currently occupied, Zethkar continued, reading from a crystalline tablet that seemed to grow from his own hand. All new technological developments must be submitted to the Council for review and approval before implementation. Trade activities will be subject to a 30% taxation rate, with proceeds going directly to Council operations. Paul Davis shifted in his seat, and Jake could see the Trade Commissioner's jaw tighten. These weren't terms of partnership, they were terms of surrender. Furthermore, the speaker's voice grew even more formal. Humanity will limit their military vessels to defensive configurations only. No human ship may carry weapons capable of planetary bombardment or possess faster-than-light capabilities exceeding Council-approved specifications. The chamber fell silent except for the gentle bubbling of the Delphi tanks and the soft clicking of Hive Queen communications. Jake felt the weight of dozens of alien gazes upon him, all waiting to see how humanity would respond to what amounted to total subjugation. Admiral Stone's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward her communication device, but Jake gave the slightest shake of his head. Not yet. Finally, Zethkar concluded, humanity will provide full access to all research facilities, manufacturing, centers, and colonial installations for regular Council inspections. These terms will remain in effect indefinitely, subject only to review by the full Council Assembly. The silence stretched longer now, pregnant with expectation. In the 3 months since negotiations had begun, Jake had watched the alien delegates grow more confident with each session. They believed they held all the cards, that humanity's rapid expansion through space was something they could simply regulate away with bureaucratic declarations. Jake picked up his leather briefcase from beside his chair, the soft click of its clasps echoing loudly in the quiet chamber. He placed the human delegation's documents inside with deliberate care, making sure each page was properly aligned before closing the case. Ambassador Morrison, Consul Ripth called out, her aquatic form rippling with what Jake had learned to interpret as confusion. Surely you wish to discuss these terms before responding. Jake turned to face the Delphi delegate, his expression calm and unreadable. Consul Ripth, the terms have been presented clearly. There's nothing left to discuss. Admiral Stone and Commissioner Davis stood as Jake signaled them, their own briefcases already packed. The human delegation had come prepared for this moment, though the aliens had no way of knowing that. You cannot simply leave, declared Queen Velara of the Hive Queens, her voice carrying the harmonic resonance of her species' collective consciousness. These negotiations have lasted 3 standard cycles. Surely humanity requires time to consider our generous offer. Jake paused at that word. Generous. 3 months of increasingly unreasonable demands, and they called this generous. "Your Majesty," Jake replied with perfect diplomatic courtesy, "we have considered your offer very carefully. Our answer is no." The word hung in the air like a physical thing. In 10,000 years of Council history, no species had ever simply refused the terms offered by the galactic government. Species might negotiate for better conditions. They might request modifications or clarifications, but they never just said no. Speaker Zethkar's crystalline form flared brighter, his equivalent of raised voices. "Ambassador Morrison, you seem to misunderstand the situation. These are not suggestions or requests. The Council has voted, and these terms represent the will of galactic civilization." Jake walked toward the chamber's massive doors, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Behind him, Admiral Stone and Commissioner Davis followed, their military bearing evident in every step. The alien delegates watched in growing alarm as the impossible happened before their eyes. "Ambassador," called out Fluxamar of the Lumina Collective, his energy form pulsing with urgent colors, "your species cannot survive outside the galactic community. You need our trade routes, our established colonies, our protection from the dangers of deep space." At the chamber doors, Jake turned back one final time. The alien delegates sat frozen in their seats, apparently unable to process what they were witnessing. For generations, they had grown accustomed to younger species accepting whatever conditions were offered, grateful just to be included in galactic civilization. "Honored delegates," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly across the chamber, "humanity thanks the Council for clarifying its position. We now understand exactly where we stand." He paused, looking around the chamber at each delegation in turn. The Zephyrians with their crystalline arrogance, the Delphi with their ancient wisdom, the Hive Queens with their collective certainty, the Lumina with their energy-based superiority. All of them so sure that humanity had no choice but to submit. "We wish you well in your future endeavors," Jake continued. "Perhaps our paths will cross again under different circumstances." The massive doors of the Council chamber began to slide open, their movement controlled by sensors that detected the humans' approach. Jake could hear urgent conversations beginning behind him as the alien delegates finally began to realize that something unprecedented was happening. "This is not how diplomatic negotiations conclude," Speaker Zethkar called out, his voice now carrying what Jake recognized as the first hint of uncertainty. "There are procedures, protocols that must be followed." Jake stepped through the doorway, Admiral Stone and Commissioner Davis beside him. "Speaker Zethkar," he said without turning around, "humanity is no longer interested in following your procedures." The doors sealed shut behind them with a soft hiss, leaving the Council chamber in chaos as alien delegates tried to comprehend what had just occurred. For the first time in galactic history, a species had walked away from the negotiating table rather than accept the terms offered by the galactic government. In the corridor outside, Admiral Stone activated her secure communication device. "Control, this is Stone. Execute Protocol Omega immediately. All assets, all colonies, all personnel. Full implementation within 6 standard hours." Jake continued, walking toward their shuttle, his expression calm despite the magnitude of what they had just set in motion. Behind them, through the sealed doors of the Council chamber, they could hear the rising voices of aliens who were just beginning to understand that they had gravely miscalculated humanity's position. The real negotiation was about to begin, but it wouldn't be happening in the Council chamber. It would be happening across the galaxy as humanity demonstrated exactly what they thought of the Council's generous offer. Captain Ryan Bell was reviewing supply reports on the bridge of his heavy cruiser New Boston when the priority transmission arrived. The message came through on Admiral Stone's personal command frequency, encrypted with codes that Ryan had hoped he would never need to use. He read the brief text twice before the full meaning hit him. Protocol Omega. Immediate implementation. Ryan had known this day might come since he first received his sealed orders 18 months ago. Every human captain, every colony governor, every station commander had been given identical instructions and told to hope they would never need them. The protocol was simple in concept but massive in scope. Complete withdrawal from all contested space within 72 hours. "Communications," Ryan called to his bridge crew. Send flash priority to all human assets in the Kepler system. Begin evacuation procedures immediately. Full implementation of Contingency Plan 7. Lieutenant Carol Hayes looked up from her station with confusion. Sir, that's the emergency withdrawal protocol. Are we under attack? Ryan shook his head as he activated his command console. No attack, Lieutenant. But we're leaving anyway. All of us. Within minutes, the first evacuation ships began arriving at Kepler 7, the human mining colony that had been extracting rare metals from the planet's asteroid belt for nearly 5 years. The colonists had been drilled on evacuation procedures, but they had always assumed it would be because of some natural disaster or military threat. They never imagined they would be abandoning a profitable operation simply because negotiations had failed. Colony Supervisor Dan Carter watched from the control tower as massive cargo ships descended to the surface. The evacuation wasn't panicked or rushed. It was methodical and thorough. Every piece of valuable equipment was being loaded onto transport vessels. Every data core was being wiped and removed. Every trace of human technology was being systematically erased. How long do we have? Dan asked his assistant, Maria Santos, as she coordinated the loading operations. Captain Bell says 72 hours for complete withdrawal, Maria replied, checking her tablet. But the heavy equipment teams think they can have everything critical out in 48. Dan nodded as he watched a fusion reactor being carefully dismantled and loaded onto a specialized transport. The aliens who had been trading partners with the colony stood at the perimeter, watching in stunned silence as humanity simply vanished before their eyes. The Norvani traders who had been negotiating a long-term contract for processed metals could only watch as their potential partners packed up everything and prepared to leave. On New Terra, Governor Helen Carter faced an even more complex evacuation. The agricultural world supported over 2 million human colonists and had become a major food supplier for several alien species. The planet's vast hydroponic farms and livestock facilities couldn't simply be abandoned. They represented years of careful development and billions of credits in investment. But Protocol Omega was clear. Nothing of value was to be left behind for the Council to claim or study. Helen stood in the primary coordination center, watching dozens of screens that showed evacuation activities across the planet. Massive agricultural ships were landing in the farming districts, their cargo holds designed specifically for this type of emergency relocation. Entire hydroponic facilities were being disassembled and loaded, complete with their nutrient systems and atmospheric processors. The livestock evacuation is ahead of schedule, reported Agriculture Minister Tom Wilson. The animal transport ships can carry everything in 3 trips instead of 4. What about the soil enhancement systems? Helen asked. Those systems were among humanity's most advanced agricultural technologies, capable of transforming marginal farmland into highly productive fields in just months. Already removed, Tom confirmed. Dr. Wright's people pulled the core components yesterday and installed self-destruct charges in what's left. When we leave, there won't be anything for anyone to reverse engineer. The aliens who had been working alongside the human colonists watched the evacuation with growing alarm. The Delphi agricultural specialists who had been learning human farming techniques found themselves suddenly cut off from their teachers. The Zephyrian trade representatives, who had been negotiating contracts for New Terra's grain exports, could only stand helplessly as their suppliers disappeared. Dr. Kevin Wright supervised the most sensitive part of the evacuation from his laboratory at the Alpha Centauri research station. The quantum computing arrays housed here had been revolutionizing galactic commerce, providing computational power that far exceeded anything the Council species possessed. The technology represented decades of human research and development, and it was far too valuable to leave behind. "Are you sure about this?" asked Dr. Betty Foster, his lead researcher, as she watched the technicians prepare the destruction charges. "These computers could benefit the entire galaxy." Kevin nodded grimly as he entered the final authorization codes. "The Council made it clear they don't want us as partners, Betty. They want us as subjects. If they won't treat us as equals, they don't get access to our gifts." The quantum arrays disappeared in controlled implosions that left nothing but twisted metal and fused circuits. The aliens who had been benefiting from the enhanced computational power would find their research suddenly crippled, their economic models failing without the processing capability they had grown dependent on. Similar scenes played out across 73 star systems as humanity implemented the largest coordinated withdrawal in galactic history. Research stations were evacuated after their data cores were wiped clean. Trade posts closed overnight, their human operators disappearing with all their advanced equipment. Mining operations were abandoned after every piece of valuable machinery was removed or destroyed. The coordination was flawless, speaking to months of careful planning. Supply ships arrived exactly when needed. Evacuation schedules meshed perfectly across multiple systems, and not a single human asset was left vulnerable to Council seizure. It became clear that humanity had been preparing for this possibility since their first contact with galactic civilization. Captain Sarah Mitchell commanded one of the evacuation fleets, her ships moving constantly between systems to transport colonists and equipment to the designated rally points. Her crews worked around the clock, but there was no sense of panic or desperation. Every human involved in the evacuation understood exactly what they were doing and why. "It's remarkable," her navigation officer, Lieutenant Alex Turner, observed as they jumped to their next destination. "Every colony, every station, every operation was ready for this. How long have we been planning for total withdrawal?" Sarah smiled grimly as she watched the stars shift outside the bridge windows. "Since the day we first applied for council membership, and they told us we needed to prove ourselves worthy. Humanity doesn't like being told we're not good enough." By the end of the first week, the transformation was stunning. Human space had contracted from 73 systems to just 12, all located in a region near the galactic rim that the aliens had previously considered worthless. The area was far from major trade routes, prone to dangerous solar phenomena, and generally regarded as unsuitable for advanced civilization. But as the alien observers would soon discover, humanity had chosen their fallback position very carefully. The region might seem worthless to species that preferred established, safe territories, but it offered something far more valuable to humans: freedom from interference and room to grow without council oversight. The last evacuation, ship departed from the former human territories exactly 71 hours and 43 minutes after Admiral Stone's order had been transmitted. Behind them, they left empty colonies, abandoned stations, and bewildered aliens who were just beginning to understand that something fundamental had changed. In the galactic balance of power, humanity had called the councils bluff and folded their hand rather than play by rules they found unacceptable. Now the real game was about to begin. Speaker Zethkar stood before the assembled council delegates, his crystalline form glowing with what he believed was justified satisfaction. The emergency session had been called 3 days after humanity's dramatic departure, and the initial mood among the alien representatives was one of relief and vindication. "As you can see from the reports," Zethkar announced, his voice carrying across the chamber with crystalline clarity, "humanity has retreated to their insignificant corner of space near the galactic rim. Their withdrawal proves that our firm stance was correct. When faced with the united authority of the Council, even the most stubborn species eventually recognizes the wisdom of established order." The Hive Queens clicked their approval, their collective consciousness radiating satisfaction. Queen Valara spoke for her entire species when she declared, "The disruption to galactic stability has been eliminated. Humanity's aggressive expansion has been contained, and normal commerce can resume." But Consul Ripth floated silently in her tank, her aquatic form rippling with currents that spoke of deep unease. Her species had evolved in the complex underwater currents of their homeworld, developing an instinct for detecting subtle changes in flow and pressure that often warned of approaching storms. Something about humanity's withdrawal felt wrong to her experienced senses. "Speaker Zethkar," she called out, her tentacles moving in patterns of concern, "I have reviewed the evacuation data from our monitoring stations. The speed and coordination of their withdrawal was remarkable. In my experience, such precise execution requires extensive advance planning." General Rexthor of the Zephyrian military waved dismissively, his crystalline armor catching the chamber lights. "Of course they planned their retreat, Consul. Any reasonable species would prepare contingency plans for diplomatic failure. The important thing is that they recognized our authority and complied with our decisions." The first signs of trouble appeared within 2 weeks of humanity's departure. Trade Minister Fluximar of the Lumina Collective brought disturbing reports to the Council's Economic Committee. The energy-based beings had always been fascinated by efficiency and optimization, making them ideal analysts of galactic commerce patterns. The cargo transport networks are experiencing significant delays, Fluximar reported, his energy form pulsing with colors that indicated concern. The human logistics companies handled 37% of intersystem freight movement. Their withdrawal has created a massive gap in shipping capacity. Factory Supervisor Quintar of the Hive Queens faced similar problems on the manufacturing world of Betros V4. The advanced fabrication equipment that humans had installed worked perfectly, but when the first major breakdown occurred, Quintar discovered that no one among her workers understood the repair procedures. The human technicians provided excellent training manuals, Quintar explained to her replacement team, but these machines use principles that our engineers cannot fully comprehend. The quantum resonance chambers, the molecular assemblers, the neural processing cores, we can operate them, but we cannot fix them when they malfunction. The Norvani delegation, one of the newer species to join the council, brought even more troubling news. Ambassador Trill Ada reported that several minor breakdowns in human-installed equipment had revealed sophisticated sabotage built into the systems. The damage is not obvious, Trill Ada explained to the concerned delegates. The sabotage was implemented at the molecular level during manufacturing. Critical components were designed to fail after a specific time period, or when certain repair procedures were attempted. It appears the humans anticipated this situation and prepared accordingly. Dr. Kim Valler, the Council's chief technology analyst, confirmed these reports after examining abandoned human facilities. Every piece of equipment left behind has been expertly compromised. The sabotage is elegant and thorough, not destructive damage, but subtle alterations that make reverse engineering impossible. Circuit pathways have been rerouted through components that dissolve when exposed to scanning beams. Software contains recursive loops that corrupt themselves when accessed without proper authorization codes. The agricultural crisis hit next. The soil enhancement systems that humans had introduced to dozens of worlds simply stopped functioning as their biological components died off without proper maintenance. Crop yields on planets that had grown dependent on human farming techniques began dropping dramatically. Governor Zalinus of the agricultural world, Ceres Major, sent increasingly desperate reports to the Council. Our harvest projections have dropped by 60%. The human enhancement bacteria require specific nutrient supplements that we cannot replicate. The automated irrigation systems have locked themselves down, apparently programmed to require human authorization codes that we do not possess. The Lumina Collective made perhaps the most disturbing discovery of all. The quantum processing cores that had accelerated their research by decades simply went dark one morning, displaying only a simple message in basic galactic standard. License expired. Please contact Terran technical support for renewal. Dr. Wright's team had apparently built kill switches into every piece of advanced technology they had shared, switches that could be activated remotely or programmed to trigger after specific time periods. The aliens found themselves cut off from technological advances they had grown dependent on, with no way to restore the lost capabilities. Economic Advisor Cresvin presented increasingly grim reports to emergency council sessions. Human colonies provided significant portions of rare earth elements essential for modern technology. Their agricultural world supplied food to over 40 systems. Their manufacturing centers produced components that dozens of species relied upon for their industrial base. The true scope of humanity's integration into galactic civilization became clear only after they were gone. They hadn't simply been participants in the galactic economy. They had quietly become essential to its functioning. Their efficiency, innovation, and reliability had made them indispensable partners that other species had taken for granted. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades began experiencing bottlenecks and delays. Manufacturing centers found themselves unable to maintain production schedules without human-supplied components. Research institutions discovered that their most advanced projects depended on human technologies that were no longer available. The younger species that had recently joined the Council began expressing doubts about the wisdom of the human expulsion. The Norvani, the Kalari, and the Thren had all benefited significantly from human assistance in developing their spacefaring capabilities. Without access to human technical support, their expansion plans ground to a halt. Perhaps we were hasty in our demands, Consul Ripth suggested during one particularly tense session. The humans were never actually aggressive toward Council members. Their expansion was rapid, yes, but it was peaceful expansion that often benefited the systems they entered. Speaker Zethkar's crystalline form flickered with annoyance. The decision has been made, Consul. Humanity chose to reject our authority and withdraw from civilized space. We cannot appear weak by reconsidering our position every time there are minor economic disruptions. But the disruptions were far from minor, and they were growing worse each day. Reports flooded in from across Council space describing supply shortages, equipment failures, and economic difficulties that all traced back to humanity's sudden absence from galactic civilization. The Maitai aliens were beginning to realize that their attempt to control humanity's expansion had backfired spectacularly. Instead of forcing the humans to submit to Council authority, they had driven away a species that had become crucial to the stability and prosperity of galactic civilization. And somewhere out in the supposedly worthless space near the galactic rim, humanity was building something new. 3 months after humanity's withdrawal, the Council chambers on Nexus Prime buzzed with an energy that Speaker Zethkar had never experienced in his long diplomatic career. Emergency sessions had become routine as reports of economic collapse poured in from across the galaxy. But today's meeting carried a sense of urgency that bordered on panic. General Rexthor stood before the assembled delegates, his crystalline armor dimmed with what his species displayed as deep concern. The Zephyrian military commander had always projected confidence and strength, but the intelligence reports he carried today challenged everything the Council thought they knew about humanity's retreat. Our deep space reconnaissance units have detected massive construction activities in human space, Rexthor announced, his voice carrying unusual uncertainty. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Long-range sensors indicate industrial activity on a scale that exceeds our largest manufacturing centers, but the interference field surrounding their territory prevents detailed analysis. Consul Ripth rippled with alarm in her aquatic tank. What kind of interference field? Our sensor technology should be capable of penetrating any known screening methods. Rexthor's form flickered with embarrassment. That's the disturbing part, Consul. The interference appears to be based on principles we don't understand. Our best scientists believe the humans are using some form of quantum distortion field that bends sensor readings around their space. We can detect the edges of their activity, but we cannot see what they're actually building. The Hive Queens stirred uneasily in their section of the chamber. Queen Velara spoke with the combined voice of billions of linked minds. Our collective consciousness has attempted to probe the human territories through psionic means. We encounter barriers that suggest technological development far beyond what humanity possessed when they departed. Something significant is happening in their space. Dr. Kim Valar, the Council's chief technology analyst, added his own troubling observations. Analysis of the energy pattern suggests massive industrial construction, possibly including shipyard facilities of unprecedented size. The power requirements alone indicate they have developed new energy sources that dwarf our fusion technology. Trade Minister Fluximar brought even worse news from the economic front. Agricultural worlds throughout the galaxy are reporting complete crop failures without human soil enhancement technology. Manufacturing centers are operating at 40% capacity due to equipment breakdowns we cannot repair. Transport costs have increased by 600% as we struggle to replace human logistics networks. The most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Trilada of the Norvani species stood to address the chamber, but her usual respectful demeanor had been replaced by something that made the older council members deeply uncomfortable. Honored delegates, Trilada began, I bring a message from the Norvani High Council regarding our continued membership in this organization. Speaker Zethkar's crystalline form brightened with anticipation. Perhaps the younger species were finally recognizing the wisdom of established order, despite their current difficulties. 3 days ago, humanity made direct contact with our homeworld, Trilada continued, causing a shocked silence to fall over the chamber. They offered us full membership in something called the Terran Alliance, with immediate access to technologies that far exceed anything we have seen in Council space. The silence stretched as the implications of her words sank in. General Rexthor was the first to speak, his voice carrying barely controlled alarm. That's impossible. We control all first contact protocols. No species can establish diplomatic relations without Council oversight. Trilada's expression showed what might have been pity. With respect, General, humanity never agreed to those protocols. They have been in contact with 17 species that the Council has never encountered. All have chosen to join their alliance rather than petition for Council membership. Queen Valara's collective voice carried harmonics of shock. You speak of technologies beyond Council capabilities. What evidence do you have of these claims? In response, Trileta activated a small device that projected a holographic display above the chamber floor. The image showed sleek spacecraft unlike anything in Council databases, their design suggesting capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about space travel. These are Terran Alliance vessels, Trileta explained. They use something called quantum tunnel drives that allow faster-than-light travel, without the dimensional stress that limits our current technology. Their ships can cross the galaxy in days rather than months. Dr. Kimvaller studied the holographic projections with growing alarm. The power requirements for such technology would be enormous. What energy source could possibly support such capabilities? Zero-point energy extraction, Trileta replied. The humans have learned to tap directly into quantum fluctuations for unlimited power generation. They offered to share this technology with all Alliance members immediately upon joining. The chamber erupted in urgent conversations as delegates tried to process this information. Zero-point energy had been theoretical for millennia, considered impossible by the galaxy's best scientists. If humanity had actually achieved such a breakthrough, it represented a technological leap that changed everything. Consul Ripth managed to restore order with her aquatic equivalent of shouting. Ambassador Trileta, what decision has your species made regarding this offer? The Norvani High Council voted unanimously to accept Alliance membership, Trileta announced. We formally withdraw from the Galactic Council effective immediately. Our new Alliance partners will provide technology transfers and development, assistance that will advance our civilization by centuries within a single generation. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. For the first time in Council history, a member species was voluntarily leaving to join a competing organization. Worse, they were doing so because the alternative offered better terms and superior technology. Economic advisor Cressivin stood with obvious distress. Ambassador, surely your people understand the risks of abandoning established galactic civilization for unknown alternatives. The Council has maintained stability for 10,000 cycles. Trileta gathered her documents as she prepared to leave the chamber for the final time. Advisor Cressivin, the Council has maintained stagnation for 10,000 cycles. In 3 months, the Terran Alliance has achieved technological breakthroughs that surpass anything accomplished in Council space during that entire period. The choice was simple. As she reached the chamber doors, Trileta turned back to address the stunned delegates one final time. The humans wanted me to convey a message. The Terran Alliance would welcome diplomatic contact with any Council species interested in discussing mutual cooperation between equals. They emphasized the word equals. The doors sealed behind her, leaving the Council chamber in chaos as delegates struggled to comprehend the magnitude of what had just occurred. Humanity hadn't simply withdrawn from galactic civilization. They had created a competing civilization that offered everything the Council did, but with better technology, fairer terms, and without the bureaucratic restrictions that had characterized galactic governance for millennia. Speaker Zethkar's crystalline form dimmed as the full scope of the crisis became clear. We need emergency intelligence gathering on this Terran Alliance immediately. General Rexthor, deploy all available reconnaissance assets to monitor human space. Already attempted, Speaker, Rexthor replied grimly. Our scouts report that the quantum interference field has expanded significantly. We can no longer even approach the borders of former human territory, without our ships experiencing complete sensor failure. The horrible truth was becoming undeniable. The Council's attempt to control humanity had not only failed, it had driven them to create something far more threatening than rapid expansion ever could have been. Somewhere beyond their ability to observe or understand, humanity was building a new galactic order that made the Council's authority increasingly irrelevant, and they were doing it with technologies that the galaxy's oldest civilizations couldn't even comprehend. 6 months after the failed negotiations, the massive doors of the Council chamber opened once again to admit a human delegation. But the circumstances could not have been more different from that dramatic day when Ambassador Jake Morrison had walked out in rejection of the Council's demands. This time, Morrison entered not as a supplicant seeking acceptance, but as the representative of a galactic power that had proven itself beyond any doubt. The USS Independence hung in orbit above Nexus Prime, accompanied by a fleet that made every sensor operator in the system perform double and triple checks on their readings. The ships were clearly human in basic design, but their energy signatures were unlike anything in Council databases. The vessels seemed to bend space around themselves, creating distortion effects that suggested technologies far beyond current galactic understanding. Morrison walked into the chamber with the quiet confidence of someone who held all the advantages in the coming negotiation. Behind him came Dr. Amanda Foster, the Terran Alliance's chief scientist, and Admiral Stone, whose uniform now bore the insignia of the Alliance Defense Force. The delegation took their seats at the center of the chamber, where visiting dignitaries were traditionally placed. Speaker Zethkar's crystalline form flickered with barely controlled emotions as he formally recognized the human delegation. Ambassador Morrison, the Council acknowledges your request for an audience. We understand you wish to discuss the current situation between our respective governments. Morrison stood slowly, his expression calm and professional. Speaker Zethkar, honored delegates, the Terran Alliance appreciates this opportunity to address the Galactic Council. We come here today not to renegotiate humanity's place in your organization, but to propose a new framework for cooperation between our civilizations. The subtle emphasis on the word civilizations was not lost on the assembled delegates. Morrison was speaking as the representative of an equal power, not as a member species seeking accommodation within Council structure. The Terran Alliance now encompasses 43 species across multiple galactic sectors, Morrison continued, activating a holographic display that showed the current extent of Alliance territory. Our membership includes species that were never contacted by the Council, species that chose to leave Council jurisdiction, and species that were deemed unworthy of Council membership but have proven themselves valuable partners in our alliance. Consul Ripth rippled with what Morrison recognized as deep concern. Ambassador, surely you understand that such rapid expansion creates instability in established galactic order. The Council has maintained peace for 10 millennia through careful regulation of interspecies contact and development. Dr. Foster stepped forward with a data tablet containing information that would reshape galactic understanding of technological progress. Consul Ripth, with respect, the Council has maintained stagnation for 10 millennia. In 6 months of unrestricted research cooperation, Alliance scientists have achieved breakthroughs that surpass anything accomplished in Council space during that entire period. She activated her own holographic projector, displaying technical specifications that caused Dr. Kimvalar to lean forward with obvious shock. We have developed faster-than-light communication systems that allow instantaneous contact across galactic distances. Our zero-point energy generators provide unlimited clean power for entire star systems. Our terraforming technology can transform dead worlds into garden paradises in less than 5 years. Queen Valara's collective voice carried harmonics of disbelief. Such advances should require centuries of research and development. How is rapid progress possible without the systematic approach that Council science has perfected? Morrison smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. Your Majesty, the key word is cooperation. When 43 species share their knowledge freely instead of hoarding it behind bureaucratic restrictions, progress accelerates exponentially. When researchers can pursue breakthrough theories without waiting for Council approval, innovation flourishes. General Rex Thor's crystalline armor darkened with what his species displayed as anger. You speak of cooperation, but you have stolen Council member species and established a competing government without our consent. This is nothing less than an act of galactic rebellion. Admiral Stone spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who commanded technologies that could reshape the balance of power. General, no species was stolen. Every member of the Terran Alliance joined voluntarily after comparing what we offered with what the Council provided. The choice was always theirs to make. The uncomfortable truth of that statement settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. Species were choosing the Alliance not because they were forced or tricked, but because it offered them better opportunities for growth and development than Council membership provided. Trade Minister Fluximar pulsed with colors that indicated desperate concern. Ambassador Morrison, The economic disruption caused by your withdrawal has affected billions of beings across the galaxy. Surely some accommodation can be reached that would restore stability to galactic commerce? Morrison nodded thoughtfully. Minister Fluximar, the Alliance is prepared to offer comprehensive trade agreements, technology-sharing partnerships, and even joint research initiatives. However, these arrangements would be between equals, not between a ruling body and subject species. Speaker Zethkar's form flared brighter as the implications became clear. You are demanding that the Council recognize your alliance as an equal governmental entity. This would fundamentally alter the structure of galactic civilization that has existed for millennia. Speaker Zethkar, Morrison replied, that structure has already been fundamentally altered. The question now is whether the Council wishes to adapt to the new reality or remain isolated in an increasingly obsolete system. Dr. Foster activated another display showing comparative development statistics. Council space currently shows declining technological advancement, reduced economic efficiency, and increasing member dissatisfaction. Alliance space shows exponential growth in all categories. The trends are clear. Consul Rippeth was the first to voice what many delegates were thinking. What guarantees do we have that humanity won't simply dominate this new arrangement as we feared they would originally? Morrison's expression grew genuinely warm for the first time during the session. Consul, that's exactly the right question. The fundamental difference between the Council and the Alliance is in our approach to governance. We don't rule our members. We serve them. He gestured to Dr. Foster and Admiral Stone. Every species in the Alliance has equal representation in our governing assembly. Every member has equal access to Alliance technologies and resources. Every decision is made collectively, with no single species holding veto power over the others. Admiral Stone added, the Alliance Constitution specifically prohibits any member species from claiming authority over another. We learned from studying Council history that concentrated power leads to stagnation and resentment. The chamber fell silent as delegates processed the choice they faced. They could maintain their traditional authority structure and watch their civilization slowly decline as more species defected to the Alliance. Or they could swallow their pride and accept a new galactic order based on cooperation rather than hierarchy. Speaker Zethkar spoke after a long pause, his voice carrying the weight of historical decision. What specific terms does the Alliance propose for this new relationship? Morrison activated his final presentation, showing a framework that would reshape galactic politics forever. The Galactic Council would be reformed as the Galactic Federation, with authority limited to its current member species. The Terran Alliance would operate as a separate but equal governmental entity. Both organizations would cooperate on matters of mutual interest while respecting each other's sovereignty. The vote, when it finally came after hours of debate, was closer than Morrison had expected but decisive nonetheless. The Council voted to accept the new framework and begin negotiations for the establishment of the Galactic Federation as a partner to the Terran Alliance rather than its superior. As the session ended and Morrison prepared to leave, Speaker Zethkar approached him privately. Ambassador, I must ask, how long were you planning this withdrawal? Morrison considered the question carefully. Since the day we first applied for Council membership, and were told we needed to prove ourselves worthy of consideration. We spent those years not just trying to meet your standards, but building something better. And if we had simply treated you as equals from the beginning, Morrison's smile carried sadness but no bitterness, then we would probably still be sitting in this chamber as Council members, working together to build something magnificent instead of competing to see who could build it faster. The irony was not lost on either of them. The Council's attempt to control humanity's rapid expansion had created exactly the scenario they had feared most, a galaxy where human influence was completely free from Council oversight. But perhaps this new arrangement might actually benefit everyone more than the old system ever had.